I think the important thing was that I had a really clear goal. It was the top of Everest. The vision couldn't be any more straightforward in that sense. I was 22 when I reached the summit, so I took the youngest British female record from Tori James. By the time I signed up and was like, yes, I've done the training, I've been to the Himalayas, I know I can survive in the dead zone. So now Everest is the next step. The difficult thing was actually finding the money to climb Everest. It was about £50,000. By February 2010, I had nothing to show for it. What is the point in getting up and going training for a mountain I'm not going to climb, right? It just all seemed pointless. Just when you're at your lowest point, there was someone there to pick me up.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Dandar.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. Hey Bonita, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're in your car. I do really appreciate you coming on the show today. I believe you're traveling back from a keynote that you've just done.
Yeah. So this is how we got in touch in the first place. I saw your session recently, and I think you saw mine as well for a virtual event that we did together. And so this is how our paths have crossed, yes. And this is my life. I'm always traveling to events. So thank you for joining me on my way home.
Oh no, the pleasure's all mine, and thank you so much. And Bonita, for this particular episode, what superpower would you like to bring?
Gosh, where do I start? Really, I think I just love the idea of knowing when I was going to die. I know that sounds really bad, but it would allow me to just go on any mountain, do any climb, just having that like, no, today's not the day. It would just give you that freedom really to do everything, because now I'm a mother. I worry so much about the consequences of my favorite thing in the world, which is climbing mountains. And if I somehow knew that I was going to be okay, then there'd be nothing stopping me. So that would be a nice superpower to have, but also quite a morbid one, I guess, in the long term.
I was just wondering for tech people out there, what they'd be thinking right now.
Yeah, it's maybe not one you're expecting. I mean, there are others I was thinking about too. I think we try and cultivate a lot of these superpowers, like being calm, I think, is a superpower. Being a good decision maker is a superpower. But if you really want to go there with superpowers, then I'm going to go for something that like you cannot cultivate as a human being. This is like God level superpower.
Love it. Let's go with that. And Bonita, I would love to know whereabouts you are in the country, first of all. You're in the UK?
Yeah, I'm on the M4. I'm driving back to London. I live in northwest London now. And so no mountains on the doorstep, unfortunately.
I was going to say, like, your journey, which we'll hopefully go into in a moment, is all around mountains. So you're definitely not near any mountains that you can...
The M4.
Yeah. Oh, well, that probably adds even more intrigue into your journey and how you fell in love with mountains. So were you always interested in mountains as a young girl? Like, where did that whole passion arise from?
I didn't grow up near any mountains. My parents were not outdoorsy people. Their idea of being outdoors was sitting by a swimming pool on holiday in August for a week every summer. So that was pretty much the only time my parents went outside. So I did not grow up hiking or going on walks or spending a lot of time in the outdoors in the UK at all. But I had moments, like glimpses into the mountains through school trips. So in our year 6 week away, we went to Rosagwalia in Wales. And then after that, I went on a school ski trip when I was about 14. And on both those experiences in the mountains, I was brought to tears because I loved it so much. I just couldn't believe how beautiful the mountains were. I loved the heavy backpacks. I loved the blisters. I loved the long days. And I hated when it was over. And I realized that I was the only one that felt like that out of my class. So there was obviously something different, but it wasn't until I was 20 years old, I was at university and I went to a lecture about mountaineering that it suddenly just clicked. Like, I love this sounds so cool. And it was about specifically climbing Mount Everest. And the people that gave the lecture said when they got to the summit of Everest, they could actually see the curvature of the earth. And I was like, I'm done. That is my dream. I'm going to leave this room and I'm going to turn my life upside down. And 2 years later, I stood on the summit of Everest.
And Bonita, just for the audience, are you the youngest British female to climb Everest? Like, just tell me the sort of accolade that you hold.
I used to be. I was 22 when I reached the summit. So I took the youngest British female record from Tori James, who I think was 25. And then 2 years later, after I did it, not one, not two, but three young women, all 19, all went and climbed it in the same week. So my record was broken 3 times in 1 week by 3 wonderful 19-year-olds. So yeah, I didn't hold it for very long. And I think the youngest out of those 3 still holds it to this day, Leanna Shuttleworth.
Wow. And I'm sure you had a part to play in the inspiration for their journey as well. So that's absolutely amazing.
I hope so.
Yeah. And let's just rewind a little bit then. So when you walked out of that lecture theatre, you were determined to make this happen. Like, where do you go from there? It's not like you just jump on a plane and arrive at bottom of Mount Everest and say, let's do some climbing. Like, what did that journey look like?
Well, I think the important thing was that I had a really clear goal. It was very pointy. It was the top of Everest. The vision couldn't be any more straightforward in that sense. So in that regard, all I had to do was work backwards. I had to work out what skills would I need to get to the summit of that mountain? How would I acquire them? On what other peaks? What mountains would be my stepping stones? And I just worked all the way back to the point of going, right, well, to where I am right now. I need to go and buy a pair of hiking boots. I need to go on a beginner's climbing course. And the path was, in my eyes anyway, very clearly laid out in front of me all the way to the summit of Everest. I just had to reach those milestones, and then the next milestone would open itself up to me. So in that way, it was fairly straightforward, actually learning how to climb. The difficult thing was actually finding the money to climb Everest. It was about £50,000 in 2010 when I climbed it. So it's a lot of money for a 22-year-old to find. And I didn't know anyone that could help me with that money. So I had to find a British business to sponsor me. And that was actually the most complicated thing, apart from learning how to climb.
Oh, I love that, because many of us often face big challenges, big, scary challenges. And thinking about the end goal and only the end goal can be quite daunting, because you think, how am I ever going to get there? But it sounds like you were saying there, you broke that down, working backwards into its smaller mini goals almost, and then took it one step at a time. And the money's a big thing, right? That's a huge amount of money to find from somewhere. And not saying anyone go rob a bank, but it is a sort of money that you could only get by robbing a bank.
Thinking about it. I would have done. Yeah, it was, in some ways, it was a very simple goal, and it wasn't a complicated one. So much of what we deal with today in our working lives is really complex goals that have different streams to them. The only complicated thing, as I mentioned, was just trying to find the money. Finding the team arguably could have been tricky, but I was really lucky in that regard. I managed to find great people to take me and to go and climb Everest with. So it really just came down to, okay, the team is leaving in 6 months. By the time I signed up and was like, yes, I've done the training. I've been to the Himalayas. I know I can survive in the dead zone. So now Everest is the next step. And my team that I wanted to climb with were going in the spring season of 2010. So it was like, okay, you got 6 months to find £50,000, otherwise you can't come. And that was when it really got difficult. But yeah, managed to do it right at the last minute.
Could you tell us a little bit about that part of the journey? Because I know from hearing you speak at the previous event that I was at, it was actually really inspirational in terms of just the approach you took, because everything was against you, right?
Yeah, from the most part, it felt that way, though in the end, it all worked out perfectly. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? You can't connect those dots looking forward. When you're in it and it's awful, you feel like it's always going to be awful. But when you look back and you can see how it all worked out, then it's a nice story. And I do get to tell the nice story now. So yes, as I mentioned, I had 6 months to find £50,000 before my team were leaving for Everest. I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together, basically. I just graduated from university. I was back living at home. I had a job as a disability assistant. for an amazing person, but I also had to train for Everest, be in the best shape of my life. So the training and work was taking up a lot of time. But then on top of that, I had to find a British business to sponsor me. That was going to be the only real chance I had. So I made firstly a sort of sponsorship brochure, if you like, in Microsoft Word. And I basically listed that if I was successful on Everest, I would become the youngest British woman, and that would get loads of media attention so that any company affiliated with me would be able to be part of that media exposure. And that would be free marketing or free advertising. So this was my plan. And I sent that out to loads of companies and just got tumbleweed. So then I started picking up the phone. You can't just send out emails endlessly. You have to just confront that fear and like start the cold calls. So I started that. I was awful at it. I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to pitch my Everest dream to the receptionist of people that just like, sorry, we just can't help you. So it was terrible at first, but with every call that I made, you learn something and then you try again. And so it was quite a relentless 5 months training through winter, working and making these calls. And by February 2010, I had nothing to show for it. Not a single company really was interested. There was one that had sort of shown interest, but they wouldn't give me all the money and there was nothing on the table. But anyway, I then got a phone call from my team leader basically saying the money's well overdue and we're really serious. If you can't get the cash to us by the end of the week, you need to tell us because you can't come on the trip otherwise. So I then had a sleepless night worrying and thinking it's over. My alarm went off the next morning telling me to run before work as usual, my little bit of training for the day. And I just thought, what's the point? What is the point in getting up and going training for a mountain I'm not going to climb, right? It just all seemed pointless. There was no way I was going to find that money in 5 days if I hadn't found it in 5 months. So I tried to go back to sleep that day. And if I had, I would not be talking to you now. Thankfully, there was this very desperate and stubborn voice in my head just saying, get up. Like, this is Everest. If you want Everest, you get out of bed. Just get up. Like, don't quit on yourself. At least quit trying. So I got out of bed and I drove to the woods where I train. And I had nothing to lose at that point. And so I just thought, you know what? I'm going to call a radio station. And I'd called local radio stations in the past to try and get my story out there. But I just thought, I'm going to call the biggest station in the country. I called Capital FM. I managed to get live on air on the breakfast show with Lisa Snowdon and Johnny Vaughan. And I can't remember what was said. An hour later, I had a phone call from the company that were umming and ahhing and about me. And they just said, we heard you on the radio and we thought that was great. And we really see it now. Everything that you sent us in that sponsorship brochure about all the press attention you'd get, we can see it and we want to be part of it. So actually, we've changed our minds. We want to give you all the money you need to go and climb your mountain. As long as the next time you're in the press, you mention Vocalink. And I just thought, I'll tattoo that on my forehead. Really, I'll do anything for that money. So it was incredible. And I just couldn't believe it when I went to pay my team a few days later and my bank balance read £50,012. It was a dream come true.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, it sounds just as inspirational hearing it from you again, because like I said, I was at your talk and I think there's a part of us that always wills the underdog on, right? Like whenever we're in a situation where the odds are against us and then individuals find some way through that, you're just egging them on. And it's so great to hear that outcome at the end.
I'm glad to hear that too. I'm glad to hear you're egging me on.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, I've not been up Everest, but I have been up to the Himalayas twice when I was in my early 20s. Yeah, there's a temple up in the Himalayas, and I believe it's one of the highest temples in India. It's 15,210 feet above sea level. But it's only open 3 months of the year, and the weather's pretty bad throughout the rest of the year. But that's the only time when the snow lets up. And there are pathways carved up so that you're not having to climb anything. It's not about mountain climbing. There's a path that goes all the way up. So that's about as close as I've ever got to experiencing anything that you've ever experienced. Now, I didn't train at all for that, but what did a typical training regime look like for you, just preparing for that moment?
Well, I mean, don't do yourself down. That sounds like a really tough experience and an amazing one, I'm sure. The training was pretty basic, if I'm honest, because I just didn't have a lot of money. I could have gone to the altitude center and trained in a hyperbaric hypoxic chamber, but I couldn't even hardly afford a gym membership. So I had an old pair of trainers, and going out my door and running as far as I could was free. So I did a lot of running, and I look back now and I realize I was probably quite fit. I used to run from my university to my parents' home, which was about 17 or 18 miles, and just do that like on a whim. So running really was the thing that gave me endurance. I think it really helped me with fast recovery, because in the mountains, you actually find that your fitness is one thing, but it's your recovery that's really important. How quickly can you get up the next day and continue climbing the mountain when the day before you've absolutely ruined your body? So I was doing a lot of long runs day on and just getting my body used to that. And the most important thing, apart from running, is if you want to climb Mount Everest, get good at climbing mountains. The specificity, I'm not sure how you say it, but the specific training for mountains, just go and climb them. It's not rocket science. The more time you spend exposed to the elements, working with your kit, understanding how your body reacts to different temperatures, different amounts of time on your feet, all of that knowledge that you build up, even on easier climbs, is so important. So I just spent as much time as I could in the mountains, and it didn't have to be particularly hard, though that was good if it was, but just exposure, hours of exposure in different conditions and on different types of climbs. Didn't massively build my physical strength, but it definitely gave me like a million and one little like bits of advice and tips and all these little edges that I needed, so that when I was on Everest itself, I knew exactly how my kit worked. I had all my systems. I knew how to hydrate myself, what foods worked, all of that. And I think that was really key. The biggest thing you need, I think, to climb a big mountain like Everest isn't necessarily to be super fit. It's just to know how to look after yourself for really long periods of time, when everything that you own is in your backpack. Everyone obviously has their own little quirks and ways of doing things. And I had to work out what mine were. So that time in the mountains was absolutely key. And I would also say off-road running, like running in the woods where I lived, not on pavements, that was just so good for running over tree roots and puddles and potholes and rabbit holes. And it sounds silly now, but it really got my brain in gear for just dealing with lots of obstacles and dangers like being a rabbit hole or something. But it's silly, but it just helped, like that body-mind connection of being able to move really quickly when I was in the mountains, over boulders, over crevasses and things like that. I just felt really confident on my feet. And so it was funny, the things, some of it was really specific, but other things was not specific at all, but just worked for me. The last thing, which is a theory of mine, is I give blood a lot. And this is a bizarre one, but I really believe that giving blood helped me acclimatize, because I was already, even before I was on Everest, I was already putting myself in a state of hypoxia almost, because I'm losing however much a pint of blood every 3 months. It takes time to build up those red blood cells again, that hemoglobin. So even when I was at sea level, my body was, there'll be doctors and physiologists screaming at this going, you're talking rubbish. But in my mind, I was thinking, well, my body is in that kind of mode already. It's already having to produce red blood cells. So it's primed to it. And so when I went to the mountains, I never really had any problems with acclimatizing. And maybe that played a part. So I'm all for the specifics, but I'm also for just being open-minded and trying to make connections where potentially you haven't had them before, and just trying to innovate and think outside the box with training as well.
It's amazing when you look back and you start joining dots, as you mentioned, how different parts of your life and the way that you live all play a part in that end experience. And it is great to be able to look back and see those things. You mentioned there was a team involved and they were patiently waiting for you to raise the money, and then hopefully you'd be able to go on this trip with them. And we're always trying to figure out, like, what is that secret ingredient that makes a great team? Based on your experiences of the people around you, what made your team so good that you were able to survive and achieve the goal that you did?
So the interesting thing about any team really is most of the time you don't get to choose your teammates. And that was the same for me in the mountains. You arrive and within a day or two, you're tying in together on Mount Manaslu, we're tying in on the glacier and going off climbing, and you're putting your life in each other's hands, and you actually don't know each other very well. So that level of trust is almost, you're really going on your instincts and your gut instincts. And I think that your gut instincts count for a lot. I think I really learned to trust my gut with people, and I've never really been proven wrong there. But then what makes a great team in the long run is you do start to climb together and you get to know each other. It's so many things. But if I had to focus on two that I think are really important that I really learned from great leaders in the mountains, I think one is to be really thoughtful. We're suffering so much. All of us are in pain. Sometimes you can just feel exhausted and so done. And the smallest kind of little action of goodwill can just make your whole day. Someone just doing something for you that you didn't ask. And I think that when you see somebody who is particularly thoughtful, it inspires other people to be thoughtful. And so I saw that in the mountains in particular with one of our leaders there, Rob Casserly. He just was always going out of his way to help other people, always that person that would be thinking about the mood and how to make everyone feel positive when we were tired. So I just really felt that he was engaged all the time with just like how to bring out the best in everyone. And that really inspired me to do the same. And in fact, on that, once in the mountains, we were on Mount Manaslu, and me and another climber, we were in a tent at, can't remember which camp. Rob and some others had gone out to set some ropes up higher on the peak, like a really tough day. And they got back to camp, and we had been lazing around very thoughtlessly, hadn't prepared for our team members' arrival, even though they'd been like fixing ropes for us up the mountain. And when they got back, Rob saw there was no water boiling, there was no drink for them, their sleeping bags hadn't been put out. He was really angry. He was like, "Are you kidding?" Because he would have done that for me. And I think good leadership or good teamwork isn't just about what you preach, it's about what you tolerate. And Rob didn't tolerate thoughtlessness. Like, he had that in himself. He wanted to always look after another person, and he expected that back. So never again have I ever not had a tent ready for a teammate when I knew that they were coming back, and had a drink for them. And so I think that is something really important. It's not what you preach. You can have all the posters on the walls. You can give all the talks and, whatever else. It's what you tolerate that matters. And as soon as you let certain things slide, other people will think, well, they're allowed to do that, or they didn't have to act like I did, so I'm not going to do it either. So it really is, as a leader, it's about what you tolerate. And yeah, thoughtfulness was one thing that I was really inspired by. And curiosity, which I think is very similar to thoughtfulness. It's just always the open-mindedness from leaders, especially, that they're always willing to learn from everyone on the team, even the new person. There's always a different perspective. It's having that humility to know that you don't have all the answers, and that you're willing to listen, like truly listen. So many of us are just terrible at basic listening skills. So for me, like, the foundations of great team are curiosity and thoughtfulness. And then from there, like, there's really basic stuff that makes a good team in the mountains. It's just good systems, the well-practiced, well-oiled systems, so that everybody on that rope that we're climbing on knows what to do in whatever situation. Everything is rehearsed. So we don't have to like guess, or there's no confusion. We know what to say. We know how to communicate. Because if you are shouting across a glacier at your teammate, and you're not shouting the exact words they need to hear, that miscommunication could kill someone. So those basic things, those basic rules and systems and forms of communication, when they are well oiled, you can move really quickly and really safely and achieve amazing things. When those haven't been practiced, you're just a big mess. You're an orchestra that's all playing out of time. And so it's just really, the basics things are really important. And it's easy to get, when you're trying to look at what makes a great team, it's easy to get drawn into all of these intangible things like, oh, thoughtfulness, curiosity, all they sound great, but actually, in truth, what people I think mostly need is just really clear frameworks, clear systems, clear objectives, and clear rules, if we're honest. And most people like to work within that and just like know their role and know what they've got to do. And beyond that, then you can start to build on all these other things around relationships and things like that. So yeah, that's a very long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be fair, it was a question that almost was like, what is the meaning of life? So it was a big question. So thank you
That's
for
true.
distilling it so nicely for us.
What do you think makes a good team, Paddy?
Oh gosh, I think the trust element is a big one. I think when you know someone's got your back, and that can be even like when you make a mistake. For example, I don't know, I might be giving a presentation and I'm doing a really bad job of it. But if my team at the back, they're stabbing me in the back and just laughing at me, then I'd feel like they've hung me out to dry. But yeah, if they then see that's going on and they're rescuing me and there for me, that'd be awesome. I see on The Apprentice, I don't know if you ever watched The Apprentice as a TV show, but because they're so competitive, the candidates are all trying to outdo one another. Even though they're in a team, you'll see someone giving the pitch, and the people that are observing, they're always stabbing them in the back. They're going, oh my God, look, they're rubbish. I would have done so much better. And that, I think, is terrible when that happens in a team.
Yeah, yeah. But you're always weighing up your personal ambition, aren't you, versus the team ambition. I think in the mountains, it's just so very obvious that you are not going to get there alone. We win together. Like there's no other option. So you're part of the team or you may as well just leave. And it's so easy to see that. It's just in daily life, it's just a lot more complicated, isn't it? Because you can always go and join another team, or it's a lot more easier to jump ship. So stuck up there in the death zone, team is all you've got. So
yeah, no, it's probably like going to another planet, almost like you're the only human beings anywhere remotely in that area. So you got to make the best of who you've got. And just to put it into perspective for people, like how high is Mount Everest, and even how many days did it take to get up to the summit?
So I think we had up to 2 months for our expedition, though we didn't need it all. We came home a week or two early. So about 6 weeks in total. It took about 10 days to get to base camp from the UK. So you got a few nights in Kathmandu, you fly to Lukla, you then walk for just around a week. So you're acclimatizing very nice and slowly. There's no rush. You spend a few days at base camp and then it's time to start the climb. And the way that we climb Everest is you can't just go straight to the summit. You have to build your resilience physically and in some ways mentally as well, and physiologically to get to the top. So we can't just go straight to the summit. We would die because we're not acclimatized. So we go up to camp 1 at about 6,000 meters. It's hell the first time you push to a new altitude. You can't eat, you can't sleep. You descend back to base camp the next day, you rest a few more days, and these rotations going ever higher onto the mountain the next time and the next time take a few weeks. And then finally, hopefully, we're acclimatized to around camp 3 at around just over 7,000 meters. And camp 1, which was felt awful, and camp 2, which are awful, now feel pretty easy to be at. Your body adapts and becomes resilient so fast. The more you push yourself, the more it changes and fights back. And I love that about mountaineering. I love that I'm under all these climbing layers that I'm wearing. There is this heart and lungs and blood vessels and red blood cells just like going into like their war mode basically, and really fighting for survival. And it's just happening and you can't even see it, and you can't really control it either. So that's one of the most fascinating parts about climbing, is that rotation process of going ever higher up the mountain and seeing your resilience build. So once those rotations up and down are completed up to about 7,000 meters, we then wait for the weather window, which can take a few days, a week, 2 weeks. You just don't know. The weather window comes when the monsoon weather system rises over India and pushes forward toward the Himalayas, pushes northwards. And it's such a large weather system, obviously, that it forces the jet stream that usually buffers Everest 360 odd days a year. It pushes that jet stream away slightly. So you get calm over the summit of Everest for this very short window of time when little human beings can then go to the top of the world before the monsoon snows come in. So I think that's incredibly poetic and almost spiritual in some ways, that like these global weather systems just shift enough for you and me to get to the top of the world. So yeah, we wait for that. And then from when we get that weather window come in, it then takes about 3 or 4 days to then get to the summit of Everest from base camp, which we then do in one push with no problems. And then it takes 2 or 3 days to get back down again.
Wow. To be up there in those extreme conditions, that's amazing. Can you tell us maybe a quick story about a time where things got really hairy? Like, were there any of those moments?
Definitely on the way down. I'd honestly say Everest was like the best experience of my life. It was just every day, even when it was dangerous or there was an avalanche or a serac fall, we were lucky that nothing happened to us as a team. And I just felt so lucky to be there. So nothing ever really on that mountain felt like a struggle that I couldn't overcome, because I was the luckiest person ever to just be there in the first place. Coming down from the summit, though, I guess I must have been tired or just not thinking straight, because I picked up a piece of rope that wasn't the rope that you should have picked up. And I pulled my weight onto this piece of rope to down climb on the Hillary step. And it came free from around a rock it was caught on or something. Like a load of slack came into the rope and I fell with it, and luckily landed on Everest and not however many thousands of meters below. But I was bashed up basically. And the more time that passed, the more my sort of neck, my shoulder, my back, everything seized up. And I had lightning bolts of pain going up and down my spine every time I tried to take a step. So it was a very small mistake with huge consequences up in the dead zone on summit day. I was moving so slowly with my climbing mate and Sherpa Lakpa Wanju that it got dark again. And so we were up in the death zone on Everest in the dark, alone. It was just like a nightmare, my own disaster movie, basically. And we managed to get back down. It was because of Lakpa, it was because of Rick Thurma, one of my other teammates, and some of our Sherpas. And yeah, they helped me. And I was so incredibly grateful. So that was probably the lowest moment. And I would say the lesson I learned from it was team, collective resilience. Like, I wouldn't be here were it not for them. Just when you're at your lowest point, there was someone there to pick me up, and I'll never forget that I owe my life to them. So yeah, I was really grateful for how incredible and how selfless they were that night. Yeah. This is pretty much as bad as it can get.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad it all worked out and you're safe and sound. I remember when we went to the Himalayas for that trip that I mentioned on one of the trips, it was raining heavily the night before. And there was a point at which you park your cars and everything, and then you've got to start your journey the next day. And we were going to park in a certain spot. And my dad was going to sleep in the car whilst we were all going to sleep in some accommodation. And it just so happened there was a policeman, and he moved us on and he went, "You can't park here." But after us, there was a bus, and the bus had parked in this spot. And that night there'd been a landslide with all of the rain up from the mountains. And the next morning, that whole bus had toppled into the River Ganges, and pretty much everyone that was inside, because they all slept inside, got washed away. So it was extraordinary that, as you mentioned, like sometimes the smallest of mistakes. And that was before they even really started their journey. And there was probably bigger dangers yet to come. But yet, unfortunately, they didn't make it. It just really ruined the whole trip. And just everybody was saddened, and it was terrible. I think this one family, the entire family got wiped out apart from the one baby. And yeah, it was absolutely terrible. But hey, I thought I'd just share that one because we sit here and we're like, oh yeah, I'd love to climb a mountain. But wow, there are some mega dangers out there. But so much respect to you for doing what you've done.
Absolutely. We're talking, and in the few days after, unfortunately, we hear about Michael Mosley, and we just went out for a walk on holiday. You just don't know what day is going to be your last. And in some ways that makes me scared to go climbing, because obviously you just are putting yourself in so much danger. But in other ways, you just think, well, people have unfortunate accidents doing all sorts of things. So do you just have to go and live your life? When I think about my friends that have lost their lives in the mountains, they weren't actually doing the dangerous thing at that point. When I think about it, most of them died on their rest day, just going for a walk or going for a bit of a training climb and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or just dying in really silly way, like frustratingly silly ways, just randomly abseiling off the end of a rope or on a training climb, or just deciding to go and do some ice climbing nearby and getting killed in some ice falling on you. So I think there's, in some ways for me, that's a big lesson, that we fixate so much on like the crux moment, the ultimate danger, and we forget that when anytime something can go wrong, and when we feel like we're not going to die, we relax and we become less attuned, I guess, to the dangers around us. So I'm always just trying to be aware when I'm in the mountains that even though it feels absolutely fine right now and I'm really scared of that thing, actually the danger could be right here. And when you are in that really dangerous moment, you are so switched on and so geared up for it that you are often the safest you'll ever be. But it's just when you're comfortable and you're relaxed, that's when things go wrong. So there's a big lesson there, I think, in everything in life, isn't it? It always goes wrong when you're not focusing on it.
Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, and I can't leave this interview without asking you, that moment when you reached the top, what was that like? And can you compare it to anything else that you've experienced before in your life so that us mere mortals can relate to it in some way or other?
So the summit of Everest wasn't the best moment on top of a mountain. I've had really euphoric summit moments, and I'd say Everest wasn't that. I got to the top of Everest, I think, just in some ways in disbelief. I couldn't believe I was there. So I don't think it really sunk in. I just remember falling to my knees on the summit. I was with Lakpa Wangju, and he took this picture of me, and I'm just crying my eyes out. I've got my head down and I'm just in disbelief, and then relief, really, that I've done it. Just this tidal wave of relief, if you like, that just flooded through me, thinking all of that, not knowing. Like I said at the beginning, my superpower would be just knowing when I was going to die. Like the whole climb, you're thinking, is today my last day? Will I ever see my family again? Is this the right decision? And you're dealing with that uncertainty, even like a year before the climb. You're preparing for it, but you're still questioning whether it's the right thing, whether it's going to be the decision that ends your life. So just getting onto that summit and realizing that it was the right decision. We're here, we've made it, we're on the top. It was just relief. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, I was really inspired to climb Everest because I wanted to see the curvature of the earth from the summit. And when we got there, of course, we were in a big cloud and there was like not really any view. But I didn't care what was out there. As soon as I got there, it didn't even faze me at all that I couldn't see anything, because obviously it was what was in here. It was like, no one can take this away from me. But in truth, it was, I remember being on the top and feeling very tired and thinking, right, I've got to get my sponsor photographs. I've got to get all the pictures. We've got a radio base camp. We've got to check our oxygen. We've got to take in some water. We've got to eat something. And all of that time, you are still in the dead zone. So you are only halfway, really, until you're back at base camp. That's when you're safe. That's the end. So I was very much like, right, this is the turnaround moment. I didn't give myself a chance to celebrate because I just didn't feel comfortable celebrating. So yeah, I allowed myself to feel that relief, but that was about it. There was a lovely moment just hugging my teammates that were there and just feeling, I remember just feeling like so proud of them, because you know that this is their dream too. And some of them have had this dream years, decades longer than me, left family, left children to come and climb this mountain. And I was just so proud of them. And then I had to stop myself and be like, I've done it too. But just being really happy for them, really happy for them. And then it was time to turn around and go. So a lot of these things, I think, you reach the end of a goal you've set yourself and you get to that finish line and you imagine it's going to be amazing. And then you get there and it's actually a little bit flat. And I think we all have that experience, right? And I think that taught me to just try and not wish these climbs away. Because when you're just thinking about, when I get to the summit, then I'll take it in. When I get to the summit, then I'll be happy. Then you're wishing everything away. You're wishing away the whole expedition. You're wishing away the bad stuff, yes, but you're also wishing away the good stuff too. So just trying to stay present on the mountain, I think is something that I learn over time. It's just like, because if you're only thinking about the summit, you're never in the present moment. And then you get there and you're in a cloud anyway, and you can't see anything. So yeah, it was great, but it was 10 minutes out of a 6-week expedition, a 2-year journey to get to that point. And I actually compare it to many moments along the way. And I think there were so many other points when no one was watching, where I take so much more. I take a lot of pride in those moments where I look back and they fill me with this warm glow. And they weren't on the summit, but obviously everyone wants to hear about the summit. It's funny.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And that's a great life lesson. I think, a lot of us are on this journey to try and make more money. And then you hear about multimillionaires who get to a certain point and they're no happier.
Still not happy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's achieving that. They've achieved the goal, but they forgot to enjoy the ride, and the whole experience is the ride and the journey along the way. So well put. Thank you for that.
Or before you know it, it's over, and you wish you could go back to that struggle, don't you? So yeah, we're so funny as human beings.
For sure. And Bonita, before we wrap up, how has your life changed now? And if people want to find out more about you and book you for some more keynotes and things like that, how can they get in touch with you?
So just find me online on LinkedIn. I'm at Bonita Norris on most of my social media, and I'd love to connect. So yes, as you mentioned kindly, Paddy, I do talks, and I love talking about mindset and teamwork and things like marginal gains. That was really important for me on the mountain. So yeah, nowadays I'm talking a lot more about climbing than actually climbing, because I've got 2 young children. So 5 and 1 they are at the moment. So the mountains, the big ones anyway, are probably a little bit too risky right now, though in the future, definitely heading back. I've already got the expedition planned. I just need to get my kids old enough first before I can go back to the Himalayas. Oh,
brilliant. And we'll add those links into the show notes. And I'm just waiting for the movie to come out. So yeah, hopefully there's a movie or some kind of film thing going.
We are writing it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Not the movie, the TV series. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. TV series. But like, don't hold your breath. If it's just down to me, it's going to be a few more years of writing.
Wow.
I'm in amongst the children and the job and everything else. So, but yeah, I'm getting there.
Oh, brilliant. Well, best of luck with that. And when you're super duper famous and you hit those big lights in Hollywood, please remember us. And I'd love to get you back on and see how that journey went.
No, I love the podcast.
Oh,
thank you so much, Paddy. It's lovely to chat to you. Really enjoyed listening to your other episodes as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was going to say, this episode's probably been harder than climbing Mount Everest because of all the technical glitches we've had, but we've got there. We've conquered the summit. So this is the moment. We should just enjoy it. So thank you so much, Bonita. I'm going to let you carry on because you are going to get back on the road, and I know your phone's going to blow up any minute as well with all of the overheating. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paddy. Bye now.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.